The rain had stopped, but the air still carried the weight of tears. The fields of Heartland were silent. No laughter. No sound of horses. No familiar call of morning. Girls. Only the wind moved through the old fences, whispering stories of a man who once stood tall against everything life threw at him. Tim Fleming, the father, the fighter, the stubborn heart of this ranch, was gone. And today, the people who loved him most gathered to say goodbye. One last time, the sky above Heartland was heavy with gray clouds hanging low like they too were grieving. The sun hid behind them, shy and weak, letting only a dim light touch the hills. Amy stood on the porch, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold. She didn't drink it. She couldn't. Her eyes were fixed on the stable. Tim's stable. His hat still hung on the same nail by the door, and the saddle he loved sat neatly on the rail, untouched since the accident. It felt wrong to move it. Like touching it might make everything too real. Inside the house, Lou moved quietly, trying to hold herself together. She had already cried enough in private. Now she wanted to be strong. For Amy, for the kids, for everyone who had come to say goodbye. But even strength felt like a mask that could break at any moment. The walls of Heartland, once filled with Tim's booming voice and teasing laughter, now echoed with silence. Down at the barn, Jack was getting ready. He wasn't much for words, but his eyes said enough. He brushed one of the horses slowly, almost as if talking to it without speaking. He was a fool sometimes, Jack murmured under his breath, but he had a good heart. Always did. The horse nudged him gently as if it understood. Meanwhile, people began to arrive at the ranch. Trucks pulled up, their engines fading as friends and neighbors stepped out, all dressed in dark coats. Their faces soft with sorrow. Old faces from the rodeo days, ranch hands who'd worked beside Tim, and even a few people he'd once argued with. They all came. Because no matter how stubborn Tim could be, had a way of leaving a mark on people's hearts. Amy took a deep breath and finally walked toward the barn. Every step felt heavy. The gravel crunched under her boots, and each sound echoed in the quiet morning. She reached the stable door and stopped. Her fingers trembled as she touched the frame. Inside, the air still smelled like leather, hay, and faint traces of the cologne Tim always wore. She closed her eyes, letting memories flood in. His laughter, his advice. His endless arguments that always ended with, "You'll thank me one day, Amy." Lou joined her soon after. For a moment, neither spoke. They just stood side by side, two daughters, sharing the same grief. Lou placed a hand on Amy's shoulder. "Ready?" she whispered. Amy nodded, but her voice cracked as she answered, "No, but we have to be." The wind picked up again, carrying with it a faint scent of rain and wildflowers. The day had begun, and so had the hardest goodbye Heartland had ever faced. It all started with the storm. Not the one in the sky, the one that had been building inside Tim for months. He'd been pushing himself harder than ever, working long hours at the rodeo, training horses, fixing fences, pretending he was still the man who could take on the world. But his body had started whispering what his pride refused to hear. He was tired. His heart, once unstoppable, had begun to slow down. Amy remembered it clearly that morning when he rode out before sunrise. He'd said he wanted to check the north pasture before the rain came. She'd offered to go with him, but he waved her off with that familiar grin. "You handle the horses? I'll handle the fences," he'd said. It was the last time she saw him alive. The storm came fast, fierce, and wild. The wind screamed through the hills, rain turned the dirt into rivers, and lightning cracked like angry fire in the distance. When he didn't return by nightfall, panic spread across Heartland. Jack, Amy, and Caleb rode out in the dark, calling his name into the endless rain. Hours passed until they found his horse, soaked and trembling. But alone, they found Tim near the fence line, his coat torn, his hat lying beside him. The doctor later said it was his heart, a silent attack, sudden and merciless. Amy never forgot the way Jack fell to his knees in the mud, or how Lou held her face in her hands and whispered, "No. Please, not like this." After that night, everything changed. Heartland didn't sound the same. The mornings were too quiet, the evenings too long. Lou busied herself with paperwork and calls, trying to stay distracted. Amy threw herself into training horses, pushing through pain she couldn't speak about. But every time she walked past Tim's truck or saw his coffee cup on the counter, it was like he was still there, just in another room. Jack took it the hardest, though he'd never admit it. He'd lost a son-in-law, a friend, and sometimes even the son he never had. He'd sit by the fireplace at night, staring at Tim's old photo, remembering the man who'd driven him crazy for years but always found a way to make things right in the end. "You were one stubborn cowboy," Jack would mutter, his voice low, "but you had more heart than any of us." And then there was the letter found, tucked in Tim's truck, a week before the funeral. A letter he'd written, but never sent. Addressed to Lou and Amy, his handwriting was rough, rushed, but full of love. "If you're reading this," it began, "I guess I ran out of time. But don't cry for me. You girls made me proud every single day. I may not have said it enough, but I loved you more than the rodeo, more than the ranch, more than life itself." Amy held that letter close to her chest every night after that. Lou couldn't read it without breaking down. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was his way of staying. His words, his spirit, his love, they lived in every fence post, every horse, every inch of Heartland. As the day of the funeral drew closer, the ranch seemed to breathe slower, quieter, as if waiting. The fields that once echoed with Tim's laughter now stood still. And for the first time, family that had faced every storm together would face this one without him. The morning came, dressed in gray. The world outside felt slower, quieter, as if the sky itself was mourning. A thin mist rolled across the Heartland fields, touching the white fences Tim had painted years ago. Every drop of dew seemed to hold a memory. Every breeze carried his name. The family gathered by the old oak tree, the one Tim planted when Amy was just a little girl. Its branches stood tall against the clouds, bending gently in the cold wind. Beneath it, a simple wooden casket rested, surrounded by wildflowers Amy had picked herself. She'd chosen them because Tim always said wildflowers were stronger than roses. They survived storms, he used to say. Lou stood at the edge of the crowd, clutching her coat close to her chest. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from nights of silent crying. She wasn't ready for this. No one ever could be. She looked at Amy, her younger sister, standing beside Jack, her hand trembling as she held a folded letter. The one from Tim's truck? Jack stepped forward first. The air was still, except for the soft sound of horses moving in the distance. He cleared his throat, his voice rough and cracked. "Tim wasn't perfect," he began, "but he was real. He was the kind of man who'd fight the world for his family, and sometimes fight them too." A few people smiled through their tears. He loved hard, worked harder, and when life knocked him down, he got up, even when no one thought he could. That's who he was. That's who he'll always be. Amy's lips quivered as she stepped closer to the coffin. The letter in her hand shook. Her voice was barely a whisper. "He taught me to ride, to fall, and to get back up again. But he never taught me how to live without him." Her words broke the silence like rain on glass. Lou turned away, hiding her tears. As the pastor spoke softly about life in heaven, a gentle wind passed through the field. The horses near the barn stirred, snorting and pawing at the ground, their energy restless, as if they too felt the absence of the man who once guided them. The sound echoed through the valley, filling the emptiness. After the final prayer, people moved forward to place flowers on the casket. Old rodeo friends, ranch hands, neighbors, each one whispered something. A memory, a goodbye. When it was Lou's turn, she hesitated. Her knees almost gave way as she reached out to touch the wood. "You made me so mad, Dad," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But I'd give anything to argue with you one more time." Amy stepped beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Two daughters, broken yet bound by love. Then, as if the sky was listening, a single ray of sunlight broke through the clouds. It fell gently across the coffin, lighting up the flowers and Tim's old cowboy hat resting on top. The wind calmed, the air warmed slightly. Amy looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. "He's home now," she said softly. Jack placed a hand on their shoulders. Around them, the family of Heartland, every soul who'd ever known Tim, stood in silence. The sound of the wind chime by the porch rang faintly in the distance. Final farewell. And in that moment, Heartland wasn't just a ranch. It was a memory, a promise, a place forever touched by one man's love, flaws, and strength. As the crowd slowly drifted away, Amy stayed behind. She knelt beside the grave, pressing her hand against the cold earth. "Ride free, Dad," she whispered. "Ride free." The funeral crowd had faded, leaving behind a heavy stillness that wrapped around Heartland like a blanket of grief. The sun was setting now, bleeding orange and gold into the quiet sky. The horses grazed softly in the distance, unaware that the man who once called to them every morning would never walk those fences again. Amy sat by the old fence near the pond. Her boots caked in mud, her eyes distant. She held Tim's hat in her lap, turning it slowly in her hands. It still smelled faintly of dust, leather, and the man who'd worn it through 1,000 storms. The silence was thick, and for once, Amy didn't fight it. She let it hold her, swallow her. Behind her, Lou approached slowly. Her heels crunched over the gravel, careful and hesitant. For hours they hadn't spoken, not during the funeral, not after the guests left. Words felt too small for the kind of loss they shared. Lou stopped beside her sister, looking out at the pond that shimmered in the fading light. "He used to sit here," Lou said softly. "Every evening after chores," said it was the only place where the world felt quiet enough to think. Amy nodded, but didn't look up. "He told me once," she whispered, "that he'd never learned how to say sorry. He just worked harder instead. Like that could fix everything." Lou sighed, her eyes glistening. "He didn't know how to say sorry because he thought we didn't need it. He thought we already knew he loved us." For a moment, they just stood there, two daughters, staring at the reflection of the sky dancing on the water. The ranch behind them glowed faintly with the last light of day. The smell of hay, the soft nickering of horses, the rustle of the wind through the trees, it all felt alive. As if the land itself was breathing with them, Amy's voice broke the silence. "I kept thinking there'd be more time, Lou. One more ride. One more talk. One more chance to tell him I wasn't mad anymore." Lou turned to her, tears falling freely now. "We all thought that. I spent years being angry at him for leaving when we were kids, and now I'd give anything just to hear him call me stubborn again." Amy laughed softly through her tears, a broken laugh, fragile but real. Lou reached out and took her hand. It was a small gesture, but it was everything. Years of unspoken tension, old arguments, and heavy guilt melted in that single touch. They sat together, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The light turned soft and golden, wrapping them in warmth. Amy placed Tim's hat gently on the fence post, letting it face the horizon. "He'd like this view," she said quietly. "Yeah," Lou replied, smiling weakly. "He always said sunsets were proof that endings could be beautiful too." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of lilacs and fresh grass. A lone horse trotted near the pond, its mane glowing in the light. Amy and Lou watched it move, calm, free, at peace. It felt like more than just a horse. It felt like a message. Lou squeezed Amy's hand one last time. "We'll be okay," she said, her voice steady now. "Heartland's still ours. And so is he in every sunrise, every storm, every heartbeat that happens here." Amy nodded, her eyes fixed on the sky, where the last light of day faded into stars. For the first time since he'd gone, the ache in her chest felt a little lighter. Maybe not gone, but bearable. The camera would fade out on that image to sisters side by side, framed by a golden sky, holding on to each other in the promise of healing. Because even after goodbye, love doesn't leave Heartland. It stays. Always the days after the funeral passed like soft echoes. The ranch felt quieter, but not empty, as if Tim's presence had woven itself into every corner of Heartland. The fences still stood strong, the horses still ran free, and the morning light still poured across the fields, golden and endless. But there was something new in the air, something gentler. Amy woke before dawn the way she always did, but this time, The silence didn't hurt as much. She stepped outside, boots crunching softly against the frost-tipped grass. The world was waking up, birds beginning to sing, the horses rustling in their stalls, and the faint scent of coffee drifting from the house. For a second, she could almost hear Tim's voice, that familiar mix of gruff and kind, saying, "You're up early, kid." She smiled faintly. "Guess I learned from the best," she whispered to the wind. Inside, Lou was making breakfast for everyone, her movements slow but steady. She'd found comfort in small things, cooking, cleaning, keeping the ranch running. It was her way of honoring him. Every plate set, every chore finished, felt like a quiet thank you to the man who had taught her strength. Even when he didn't realize it, Jack watched the sisters from the porch, his coffee steaming in his hand. He'd been through more loss than most men could bear, but this one hit different. Still, seeing Amy and Lou together again gave him peace. He'd be proud of them, he thought. Stubborn girls, just like their old man. As the day stretched on, the ranch buzzed with soft life again. Caleb fixed a broken fence, Georgie brushed Spartan, and Lisa tended to the garden Tim used to tease her about. There was laughter here and there, quiet, cautious, but real. Grief hadn't disappeared, but it had softened around the edges, turning into memory instead of pain. That evening, Amy saddled Spartan and rode out to the ridge overlooking the valley. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of sage and earth. She stopped at the highest point, where the land stretched far and wide. This had been Tim's favorite spot, he said. You could see everything that mattered from here. The barns, the trails, the river glinting like silver. Amy dismounted and stood still, eyes closed. She let the wind move through her hair, the sounds of the ranch beneath her, the heart of Heartland still beating. "I get it now," she murmured. "You weren't afraid of dying. You were afraid of leaving us unready." A hawk flew overhead, gliding effortlessly on the wind. She watched it soar higher, disappearing into the sunlight. For a heartbeat, it felt like a sign, a reminder that love doesn't end when life does. It just changes form. Later that night, Lou joined Amy by the fireplace. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Lou reached into her pocket and handed Amy a small folded piece of paper. "Found this in Dad's jacket," she said softly. Amy unfolded it carefully. It was an old rodeo ticket, worn and faded, with a note scribbled on the back. "For my girls, never give up on the ride." Tears welled in Amy's eyes, but this time, they weren't heavy with sorrow. They were full of something brighter. Gratitude. She placed the note by Tim's picture on the mantel, next to his old belt buckle and a photo of the whole family. The fire crackled softly, casting a golden glow across the room. Heartland wasn't just surviving, it was healing. Slowly, quietly, beautifully, and outside. The wind whispered through the trees, the same voice that had guided them through every storm, reminding them that even though Tim was gone, his spirit would forever ride with them, because legacies aren't written in stone. They're written in the hearts that keep beating after you're gone. Night had fallen over Heartland, but the sky wasn't dark. It was alive. Stars shimmered like scattered embers, and the moon hung low over the valley, painting the fields silver. The ranch, quiet and calm, seemed to exhale as if after days of tears and heartbreak, it could finally breathe again. Amy stood by the paddock, her hands resting on the wooden fence Tim built decades ago. It was worn smooth from years of use, from his hands, from hers, from generations of Heartland riders. The air was cool, clean, still, the kind of silence that doesn't ache anymore, but feels like peace. Spartan snorted softly beside her, his mane catching the moonlight. Amy smiled, running her hand gently along his neck. "You miss him too, don't you, boy?" she whispered. The horse nudged her shoulder as if to say yes. Behind her, the warm glow from the farmhouse windows spilled across the yard. Lou was inside, helping Katie with homework, her laughter faint but clear. Jack sat in his chair by the fire, hat tipped low, the sound of a guitar humming softly through the open window. Heartland was alive again. Different, quieter, but alive. Amy turned her eyes toward the horizon. She could almost picture Tim there, standing in his old jacket, arms crossed, that proud smirk on his face. "Don't cry, kid," she could almost hear him say. "You've got work to do." A small smile curved her lips. "I know," she whispered back. The wind picked up then, brushing through the tall grass. The ranch lights flickered gently as if bowing to a memory. And from somewhere in the distance, lone horse whinnied, the sound rising into the night like a promise. Amy looked toward the stables, where a young colt stood watching her, wild, restless, untamed. She stepped closer, her eyes soft but determined. "Hey there," she said quietly, reaching out her hand. "You're something special, aren't you?" The colt hesitated, then took a slow step forward. The moment was fragile, full of meaning, a beginning born from an ending. Amy smiled. "I think Dad would have liked you," she murmured. Lou appeared in the doorway behind her, her silhouette framed by warm light. "You're out late," she called gently. Amy turned, her face calm. "Couldn't sleep." Lou nodded, understanding without asking more. "Neither could I, for a while." They just stood there, two sisters under the open sky, their pains softened by time, their hearts stitched together by everything they'd lost and everything they still had. Amy glanced at the colt again, then back at Lou. "I think I'm going to start training him tomorrow." Lou smiled. "Dad would be proud." Amy looked at the stars. "I hope he's watching." A shooting star streaked across the sky, quick, bright, and beautiful. The sisters watched in silence, the moment frozen in quiet awe. Then the camera would pan upward, the wind whistling softly. The ranch bathed in moonlight, and Tim's voice, faint but warm, echoing through the night, "Keep riding, girls. Keep riding." Music swells, a slow piano and violin melody. A final title fades in loving memory of Tim Fleming, Heartland forever, 'cause family never ends. It just rides on. The screen fades to black. Soft hoofbeats echo in the distance, the sound of legacy continuing, of love that refuses to fade. Morning broke softly over Heartland. A pale light crept across the valley, touching every blade of grass, every fence post, every heartbeat that still belonged to this land. The grief that once hung over the ranch had thinned like fog after rain. It hadn't vanished, no. Some pain never does, but it had transformed into something gentler. Something that felt like love. Amy stood in the round pen, the young colt trotting nervously in circles. His coat shimmered in the morning light, golden brown with a white streak down his nose, just like Spartan's when he was younger. She watched him move, strong yet uncertain, wild but full of life. Every step he took felt like a reminder. Life doesn't stop after loss. It begins again, slowly, bravely. Jack leaned against the fence, watching quietly. His eyes, still tired but softer now, carried a quiet pride. "He's got fire," he said. "Reminds me of your dad." Amy smiled, never taking her eyes off the horse. "Yeah, he does." Lou appeared from the barn, her coat wrapped tight against the morning chill. "You already out here?" she teased gently. "You never rest." Amy laughed, a sound that hadn't filled the air in a long time. "I can't. He needs me." The colt suddenly stopped, turning his gaze toward Amy. Their eyes met, a moment of connection so strong it almost felt spiritual. She took a slow step forward, extending her hand. The horse hesitated, then moved closer until his breath warmed her fingers. Amy's eyes glistened, but she smiled through it. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're home now." Lou watched from the fence, her heart full. For months, their family had been shattered. Now, piece by piece, they were finding their way back. "He'd be proud of you," Lou said softly. Amy nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I know, but I still miss him." Jack stepped closer, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Missing someone means they mattered. And your dad, he mattered more than he ever knew." The wind picked up, carrying with it the smell of hay and spring rain. The horses in the pasture lifted their heads, ears twitching. It was as if the whole ranch had woken up again, not to the sound of loss, but to the promise of life. Amy turned her face toward the sky. The clouds had drifted apart, revealing a bright, endless blue. She could almost feel him there, not as a ghost, not as a shadow, but as a presence in everything she loved. "I'll take it from here, Dad," she said softly, as the camera slowly pulled back. Heartland came alive once more, Lou laughing from the porch, Jack fixing a gate, Georgie riding across the fields, and Amy leading the young colt into the light. The music swells, a mix of hope and memory. Piano and strings blending like morning and dawn. A final voiceover plays, soft and filled with emotion. Heartland has seen its share of storms. But every storm ends. Every goodbye finds its way back home. And no matter how far life takes us, we always ride back to the place, the people, and the love that made us who we are. The final shot fades to the wide-open ranch, sunlight spilling over the hills. The wind carries the faintest echo of Tim's laughter. Distant, eternal fade-out Heartland where love lives forever. To be continued.